All right, welcome back to the CrossFit Games podcast. I'm your host, Chase Ingraham, and I have Adrian Bozman with me as we walk through the 2022 CrossFit Games season as we look towards the adaptive division, one of the most anticipated divisions that we had going into last year being the very first year. And as we said, for both individual, team, teenagers, and masters, is that we look at what we did, we learn lessons that we had from that lessons, we adapt and evolve. And after one season is usually when you see the most adaptation and evolution going from 1 to 2. And, Boz, the adaptive division is no different. In fact, it's probably one of the biggest learning lessons we've had in any division since we started the Open.
Absolutely. I think there's no question of that. Last year was the first year we got to include them. Everybody competed in the Open. We had 8 divisions, which was awesome. And then we had just a few represented in Madison. We had 3 divisions that came there with the top 5 athletes. This year, we're really excited to be able to expand on that. And so all 8 divisions are going to be in the Open, of course. And then all 8 divisions are also going to have a secondary stage of competition that allows the best to move forward. And some athletes in some divisions will use that as their final. And then some divisions will move forward to Madison. So it's a big expansion from 2021. I hope that as we continue to see adaptive athletes come into CrossFit and participate in the sport and run with it, so to speak, that we can continue to increase the offerings we have for them.
And a lot of that comes from representation from all the divisions that we have within the adaptive community, which is super exciting. And, we look at the Open as something that's open for everyone across the world, whether it's experience or age, but now ability is on the table as far as being open, and seeing the adaptive athletes take on this challenge, finally get something official with the CrossFit Games season, I think is super fun, super cool. Watching them at the games last year was one of the biggest buzz. Did you see that? Can you believe that? Like some of the numbers that were going up, I'm like, what? And, we're seeing highlights on like ESPN from the adaptive division of the CrossFit Games. And that's just after 1 year.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to see, where we can take this and, the buy-in that we can get from the athletes. And it's really, really cool to see something growing like that. And it's kind of akin to some of the other divisions. I think sometimes people forget it does take time to build a division fully. And that's not satisfying to a lot of people to hear when you're in the middle of it. But, you look back to the Masters competition and we had 7 seasons before we had a secondary stage qualification for them. And we're only in year 2 for these guys, and they've got their second stage. And hopefully that trend can continue, into the future. So it's exciting times to be at the ground level and see, okay, we're building this thing. Let's see what happens with it. So it should be really cool.
Yeah. And to your point exactly is that, we just mentioned that last year was the first year there was a 65 plus category for the age group division. But before that, it was 60 plus. And as representation grows, the need for more divisions to get an accurate representation of the athletes taking that test will evolve with it. And it's no different here for the adaptive community, which is why we already have this secondary stage in place in the 2022 season that we didn't have in 2021. So for the Open, when they register for their specific division in the adaptive division, and now what is this secondary step that they'll be taking in for this season?
Well, actually, I'd like to talk about the Open just a little bit more because we learned some lessons that way as well, or from that competition last year as well. One of the things about the Open last year that athletes noticed in those divisions is we didn't have a scaled adaptive category. And that's true. That's true again for this season. We do not have a scaled adaptive category. At this point, it would chop up the leaderboard to the point of being a little bit less fun, a little bit less useful. You just have so much divisional spread that it'd be really difficult to find cohesion in that. So we made the decision, we heard that feedback and we said, yeah, that's definitely something that, for future years we have to consider. For 2022, however, we're going to keep the same format. So 8 divisions, no scaling. However, we're going to program those workouts with an understanding that we want to capture a broader range of abilities within those divisions. So we're hoping that we can make something that everybody can get in and do it. and then the best will have that opportunity to rise to the top. I think about it in the same sense as something like a 100-meter dash in the Olympics. Nobody looks at that event and says, wow, it's so miraculous how these guys can run 100 meters without stopping. That's not the challenge. The challenge isn't what the workout is on paper. The challenge is what can you do with it. And so we're taking that approach a little bit more to the adaptive divisions. Like I said, with the hope that we can capture as many people that want to do it as we can. And then, we can build off of that.
And you're building off the same principle as that you have for programming this year's Open relative to quarterfinals, relative to semifinals. And I think that's really cool.
Right.
It's like, okay, we might not be able to have a scaled division for the adaptive division, but since we have this secondary competition that you can qualify for either to the CrossFit Games or that is your CrossFit Games, is now you can actually modify the programming enough to make a more breadth test for more accessibility, knowing you have a secondary test coming up for these divisions.
You got it. Yeah. So the Open doesn't have to be the single gate to that final event. And so for that reason, it can be a little bit more broad, a little bit more, I wouldn't say forgiving, but maybe that's one way to put it. And then the best out of those divisions can move forward to that second stage and really put it on the line. And that's where we can bump up the programming a little bit more, add a little bit more difficulty to those athletes that have qualified.
And I think that, the non-forgiving part is relative to what you're talking about, the 100-meter dash, or even you think of like classic Fran, right? What's worse than classic Fran? It's like heavy Fran. It's like incorrect. It's actually lighter Fran,
Right.
Because it's not the event. It's not the workout. It's what you do with it. And the last thing I want to do is get off a pull-up bar after 21 reps and be like, well, now I have to pick it up because I have no excuses not to. And so that's
right.
part of the same vein. So when does this secondary event take place for the adaptive division?
So the secondary event is going to be online. It's going to kind of mirror the age group categories, and it'll run on the week of June 2nd to 5th during the semifinals stage of competition. So there'll be a lot going on over the course of those few weeks in May and June. We've got the live semifinals happening for the individuals and teams. We've got the adaptive online second stage happening. And then we also have the age group categories going on as well. So if you're a fan of the sport, it's going to be an awesome time to be tuned in. There's just going to be so much going on. And so if you're a competitor, obviously that's going to be a big time on the calendar as well. It's kind of the final check mark before you hopefully advance forward to the finals in Madison. So for the adaptive athletes coming out of the Open, we're going to take the top 20 out of each division, and they will have an opportunity to compete online in the secondary stage of competition. So it's pretty exciting. And we learned a lot during the semifinals last year. We had 5 online semifinals, and we ironed out some really good systems for running those competitions and resolving them quickly, and having a good test that everybody can do wherever they happen to find themselves in the world. So we're happy to take those lessons and apply them to this new competition for these guys and see what we can do.
What were some of the biggest lessons and takeaways you guys took from the virtual semifinals last year that you're applying to this year?
The online review process that we've used in the past for events like the Open, if you think about the Open, the time frame that athletes have to compete is a little bit more generous. You have a few days to do the workouts. You can redo them. The submission deadline is pretty forgiving. And the review process reflects that. There's a little bit less pressure to resolve as quickly as possible. Obviously, you don't want to let it drag out, but there is a little bit more time built into the system. At the semifinals, all of that goes away. Everything needs to be immediate. And especially when you're trying to create the environment that is a little bit closer to live competition, meaning the expectation is there's not as much opportunity to redo events. There's not as much control from the athlete as to when they can do things and what kind of environment they're in. A live event, you don't get that luxury. And so we try to do what we can to recreate that. On the flip side, the team is also challenged to try to get those results verified, locked in, and the invites sent out to the qualifying athletes as close to competition end as possible for the same reasons. We want to replicate that in-person feeling. So competition ends very shortly after that. We've got confidence that we have the right people, they did exactly what they were supposed to do, and they got a ticket stamped to Madison. So, so for us, it was really examining, okay, do we have the best process in place for that? And we amended heavily last year to try to make that more efficient and more accurate for those reasons. So I was pretty excited about that process. It was fun to dig in, and it's like a big puzzle. You have all the pieces, and you're like, okay, are they arranged correctly, or can we make this just a little bit better and have a clearer picture? And it turns out we could. So yeah, it's fun.
Now, do you go corners first, border, or do you separate by colors? Which is I'm teaching my
I'm an
son how to
edge.
do
I'm an
puzzles
edge.
right now.
I'm a frame guy myself. You got to get the frame, and then once you know what you're dealing with, you can you can start from there.
So when we look at, say, the framework, no pun intended, for the second stage, you said the top 20 in each
Yep,
division's category will advance to the second stage. Now, this is where we'll have some differences between divisions within the adaptive category as far as whose
that's right.
games start here and who advances to the next stage. Which divisions advance to Madison from the second stage?
So we're going to repeat last season as far as the athletes that are going to move forward to Madison. So we've got the upper extremity, the lower extremity, and the neuromuscular divisions will be represented in Madison. The top 5 athletes out of the online competition will move to Madison to compete. So same as we saw last year. The other 5 categories will use that online second stage as their final. So those categories will crown the fittest in their division at that stage. And so that's one more reason that this second stage is so important to us, and the programming that we choose to include in that is going to be really, really important. We've got to make sure that that test is what it needs to be to not only qualify people from the divisions moving to Madison, but to say with confidence that yes, everybody else in these other divisions, they're the fittest in these categories.
And a lot of discussion when the season was first announced, because it was announced early of which divisions are advancing, which divisions will be
Yep.
in the second stage. And the big question from the community was the question of why are these advancing and why aren't these? And we actually did a podcast here on the Games podcast with Kevin Ogar and Alex,
Oh
who
yeah.
have a
Alec.
pretty
Yeah.
a pretty good hand. Yeah, Alec have a pretty good hand in as far as being a part of or consulting with how this division goes. I mean, they run the adaptive seminars.
They've been huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the big thing really comes down to is just like we see in maybe underrepresented countries as far as age groups or even individuals or teams, is getting an appropriate number or desired number of representation to advance something like the CrossFit Games. And that's really no different here. And obviously, the big goal and desire is to get everyone in person at the CrossFit Games. But like you said earlier, it's like it's been year one. This is only year two. And it took 7 years to get an age group online qualifier for masters athletes. So part of the process starts now, but the end goal really is full representation one day.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, we would be able to offer, a huge range of opportunities for all athletes that want to compete. The unfortunate reality is that we are constrained by time and resource, and nobody's satisfied with that answer, and I totally get it. But it's the truth. And, to your point about with increased participation becomes increased opportunity, that's true. I just want to note that, we're very aware that for those particular divisions, it's not that we're ever going to see something on par with open participation in the individual category. It's we're talking about a subset of a subset of a subset of people. You have to have you think about people that are interested in fitness at all, and then you think about adaptive athletes within that, and then you think about adaptive athletes within that are actually interested in CrossFit and then interested in competition. So you can see that the population size that you have to draw from diminishes significantly, and we understand that. So we're not looking to match, say, another division numerically before we consider expansion. However, we do need to see that, yeah, people are interested in this. There is growth, and that's going to that fundamentally is going to be what drives the expansion to some degree. So, trying to think about the other question you had couched in there. why this year only those advancing? Was that another one you had?
Well, it was really just expanding on, that was the question, is why these three and not these five, and it's the same
Right.
reason that we had the previous year, although we are advancing. So it really was that singular question of representation within that subset, right? We're not looking for 100,000 people in this division to sign up, but a certain amount of people being really the end all reason of why we are going to this position for others and not a few. And again, as you said, is like, perfect world, yes, we want it to be there, but the reality of the
Yeah.
situation is what it is, and people don't have to really like agree with that, but really that's the hard truth that we're working with, and that's just the reality of competition.
Sure. And I'll say too that I think a big win for us this year was we were able to announce the season much earlier than we did last year. And that's true for all divisions. Excuse me. But particularly for the adaptive, last year we made the choice to include them in the open. And then there was a bit of a question mark for a long time as to what the rest of their season looked like. And that was not communicated to them until much later in the season. And I think that we definitely needed to improve on that. So my hope is that by putting it out and letting people know what they can participate in, what the season looks like overall, here's what we have for you. At least it gives people the option to decide whether they want to engage in that or not. I hope that they do because I think it's going to be great. And we can continue to try to be earlier about that information and show what we're planning to do for the season of 2023 and beyond, and continue that trend so that hopefully people can see that expansion and not have to be left guessing. Because I really do think that was one of the things we needed big improvement on from 2021 moving to 2022.
So we have the second phase, three divisions will move on. What within those 20, how many advance to Madison from those three divisions?
So it'll be the top five from those three divisions, top five men, top five women, that advanced to Madison. So same that we saw in 2021. And just like 2021, those categories will have the same venues as the age groupers. And our goal at the games this year is to make sure that all divisions get, spotlight at some point. Everybody gets to play on the big stage, so to speak. It's really important that we honor everybody who's got that qualification spot in the way that they should be. It's a feat to make it all the way through the season. It doesn't matter how you're competing. If you start at the open, you end up at the games. That's a really big deal. And we recognize that. We want to make sure everybody else does too.
Well, I think it's just being year two. You guys are taking a massive step in the right direction, knowing that there's more steps to come, and it all comes down to how this season shakes out. So if you guys listen, if you are an adaptive athlete thinking about just doing the open or curious about it, is get involved, get in there, because the more we have in this division and this demographic in total as part of this community as a whole that is the open and game season, I think it's all for the better. And the more we have involved, the more we're going to learn, the better we're going to be. And that's just going to be on a year
Yeah.
to year basis. So I've
And I'll
loved the
say,
addition of this.
I'll say too, Chase, that, there's a lot of passion within the adaptive athlete contingency. And I think that's great. There's lots of opinions that are flying around, some favorable and some pretty critical. And I get it. It's awesome to see that passion. I know that not everybody is going to agree all the time. And I don't expect that. But I do appreciate that people are so invested in this thing that they're willing to speak out. And I just want to say from our side that we hear that and we are listening and we do take all of these into consideration. And, it's our hope that we can continue to push towards something that everybody wants to be a part of. So we hear you guys. We love the enthusiasm. We love the passion. And, we're working for you.
And I like to hear that too. Whenever I see passion, either it's from constructive or destructive, in the end, it's all centered around caring. And the fact that we have so many people caring about this sport and this division, I think, is an overall positive. So I can't wait for this
Absolutely.
season, for this division. You guys go to games.crossfit.com for more information on the adaptive division, how you can sign up, how you can get involved, and how you can be a part of the season this year for the 2022 CrossFit Games season. That will do it for the adaptive division outline. And looking forward to, we got one more, and that is one that I would love just more breadth of information on, and that is the occupational games season. For Adrian Bozman, I'm Chase Ingraham. We'll see you guys next time.